All right, so these trade talks are happening next week, and already we're hearing talk about this deadline potentially being extended. I want to get your take on that first. Why already look to extend the deadline when you know you're going to be talking in a few days?
Well, I think they wanted to really get out ahead of what they know the markets are concerned about, what others are concerned about, and that is this August the 12th deadline. And Frank, I think it's pretty clear that both sides here would like to extend this out, perhaps another 90 days. And what that time frame buys us here, Frank, is it moves us beyond that potential meeting which you set up in the opening between Trump and Xi on the margins of APEC. So I think we're certainly looking at a way in which we extend this period. Whether it's an additional 90 days, I'm not sure, but I think both sides have signaled very strongly that they're looking to push beyond the August 12th deadline.
I want to talk about the EU and China and the U.S. and China. As we mentioned, the EU and China are having a summit right now. They're actually talking. And then we hear that the U.S. and China want to meet as soon as next week. Is the administration concerned that China is getting closer to the EU and maybe some of our allies are moving closer to China? And is that concern warranted?
I certainly don't get a sense that the administration is concerned about that, Frank, but I will be clear. Many of us here in Washington are concerned about that. In fact, I would have expected this summit between the EU and China to have gone a lot better than it has. This was not a very successful summit, which underlines the fact that there are still a lot of issues in the EU-China relationship. There are plenty of issues still in the U.S.-China relationship. So it's going to be hard to paper over those differences. But I will say, Frank, that the phrase that I'm hearing from many other countries around the world as I talk to their diplomats here in town is de-risking from both sides. I think people are very concerned about the instability in the policy environment here in Washington. It won't be easy, but I think you're certainly starting to see countries look at de-risking, which I never thought I'd be saying this, from the U.S. as well as China.
I think it's also important to note this is the 25th EU-China summit. It's not something new. So they obviously have ongoing talks and ongoing relationships. We've heard EU officials like Ursula von der Leyen basically say it needs to be more balanced. But at the same time, we're talking about tariffs between the U.S. and the EU. So is there any threat that the EU and EU officials, they just might see a closer relationship with China? Maybe it's imbalanced, but it's just more balanced than the one that could be set up with the U.S.?
I think the verdict is out here, Frank. I mean, I think some of the big concerns that the EU have, and they raised a lot of these issues, is they have become the dumping ground for a lot of the overcapacity that we've been talking about for many, many months in China. And particularly in the automobile sector, I think there's some concern. But look, I think the EU is also very, very unhappy with the way in which China has been, in their view, propping up Russia in the war in Ukraine. So those are some really big issues that I don't think we can paper over. Although the EU would love to have more of a hedge against what they see as U.S. bullying now, but it's going to be hard to really do that in the short term, given all the issues that still exist in the EU-China relationship.
All right, so you guys are down there in D.C. talking about this. I'm sure you're going to be talking about this U.S.-China meeting coming up in Sweden next week. The sticking point really seems to be, or the points of contention are rare earths and Chinese and U.S. AI-focused technology like NVIDIA chips. Is there any concern, at least on the U.S. side, that maybe China makes a more favorable rare earth deal, critical minerals deal with the EU and kind of encourages them to be a little bit have a more hardline stance with the U.S.? Is there any kind of interplay here where these EU-China talks could influence the U.S.-EU talks?
Well, look, I think when it comes to rare earths, it is very, very clear to those of us who've spoken to some of our European friends that they were shocked at the degree to which the rare earth ban that was put in place because of, they think, the U.S.-China friction hit them extremely hard. The Chinese and the EU have been talking a lot about how the EU can also get access through a smoother licensing process. So rare earths is certainly one of those things where China believes it can sort of play both sides here. But look, I think even that is not enough to really bring the EU to the degree that they need closer to China and then have a EU-US rupture. We're doing that on our own. We don't really need China to push that. But rare earths is certainly one of those issues where China thinks it has leverage and ways in which it could play both sides.
I know EVs are a big issue when you're talking about dumping from China into the EU, also things like solar panels. Are there any other economic points of contention here between the EU and China that also impact the U.S.?
Well, I think again, rare earths is the big one here. I think for the EU, it's about how their green technology sector, because China, as we know, really dominating in several sectors there. Whether or not it's going to have the ability to really keep up, but beyond that, I think the big ones we've really spoken about. It's overcapacity writ large, particularly within the auto sector. That's a major concern on the economic side for Europe.